You're on.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Kay Tisdall. I'm doing a demonstration this afternoon on Terial Magic. Uh, when you use Terial Magic, your fabric becomes like paper. If you look at how this falls, you can see it's been treated with Terial. This is a piece of fabric that hasn't, and if you look at the difference, you can totally see it, right? So, if you want to treat your fabric and get it to this stage, I suggest you spray in a plastic bag. It stops you from wasting too much spray, and if there's any left over, you can leave it in the bag. So you spray into the bag and all over your fabric. You're going to saturate it pretty good. You're going to work it into your fabric because you want it to absorb all the Terial Magic. This gets a little messy, so if you're in your sewing room, I would suggest, if you're doing it on your cutting table, that you cover your table with plastic, although it does clean off quite well. But instead of taking that chance, now you can see where it hasn't touched the fabric yet. So we do. And we might need to spray a little more. It'll make your hands a little sticky, but you know, you can always clean that off, right? So again, we'll work it in. And like I said, if there's any leftover Terial in the bag, you can do your next piece of fabric. If you're doing multiple pieces of fabric, I suggest you start with your lighter colors before you do the darks, because sometimes darker colors and reds especially, some shades of greens, you'll get dye. So you don't want dye in your bag. If you're doing white, you might get a bit of dye color in your white that you're not happy with. So that's important to remember. And okay, now as you see, this is all covered with Terial Magic. So basically I have a wet fat quarter. So I'm going to go and hang it up, and then I'll show you another method of preparing your fabric. Now it needs to be hanging for 10 minutes. If you leave it longer than that, it will dry too much. And if it dries too much, just spray it with a water spritz, and then you can iron it and you'll get the same results as I have here. So now, if you didn't want to do the plastic bag method, you can do and you smooth it in to your fabric. So when you do that, then you turn it to the opposite sides, and you can see everywhere that the Terial Magic hasn't touched. So when you spray it again, you try and do those spots. And again, use plastic on your table where you're doing it, because you're going to have overspray. So we're making sure it's all into the piece of fabric. We still have a couple of spots. And again, you roll it up and you wring it. So it's absorbing into the fabric. You can use any fabric that has a good absorbent quality. Polyester, I would really check it out before I tried using it, because it may not absorb into the polyester. But cotton works beautifully. So you let this sit. Again, it needs to sit for about 10 minutes. And then you press it and it'll set up again, like I said, like this. It's like paper. You can applique with it without a backing. You can put it through your printer. To put it through your printer, I would treat it one day and go back the next day and retreat it. So it would be even harder than this is. You can do flowers to stand alone, but you need to retreat it again because the petals wouldn't move if you cut them from this, right? Flannel, we all know how flannel stretches. So sometimes on a baby quilt, for example, you might like to do applique with flannel. So you treat it with the Terial Magic, same as what I did this, and it will become stiff, and you won't have that bias pull the same, so you can applique with it beautifully. And once it's washed, it's gone. So for a baby quilt, it's ideal. It keeps your baby quilt soft and pliable. So I'm going to treat this piece as well, and by the time I get this treated, I'd say the other piece should be about 10 minutes, shouldn't it? Yeah. For the other piece, or close. I should have had one piece sprayed. You can use this on velvet, anything on wool, anything that has a good absorbent quality. Now, as you can see, the flannel absorbs really quick. So what I like to do at home is I'll hang it to dry. I just put it out in the back room in my basement, and I set it for 10 minutes. Any longer than that, you're going to need to spritz it with water because it'll be too dry. You need to really dry it with the iron. The idea of leaving it 10 minutes is to make sure everything is absorbed into the fiber of the fabric. Now I'm going around this way to get that piece of fabric. So this is the fabric I used. I just sprayed in the plastic bag until it was absorbed. And now, if the weight of it, the feel of it is just a little bit sticky. So you iron it until it's dry. Which side? That one or this one? That one? Go around.
To yours, Kay?
That's mine. That's okay. Now, even though it was quite wrinkly, all the wrinkles will be gone when you do this. And when you're piecing blocks, like if you're making a quilt, for example, you don't need to spray it so heavy. But if you spray it, the fabric has less stretch and it will make beautiful piecing. Like I said, it's my new best friend. I'm moving the iron on.
Do you need any particular setting for your iron?
Pardon?
Do you need the iron set on anything in particular?
The iron should be set high on a cotton setting. The iron, not high enough, of course, to burn the fabric, but high enough to really dry the fabric out. It's just about drying it. You can start to see the difference in how the fabric looks. See? Right? I did both blue pieces, but it doesn't matter. So, this is a treated piece of fabric. As you can tell, you can see how flat it is. It's not folding. So if you look at this piece in comparison, this is a piece that hasn't been treated. If I can get it open. Okay. So when you look at that, even if I had it pressed, you know, it's gonna, right? But this one now, you can cut your applique pieces out of it. You can piece with it. You can make flowers. It's endless what you can do, you know. What you can imagine, you can pretty well do with it. You can print on your printer, your inkjet printer. You can cut on your cutting machine. You can embroider on your sewing machine or your embroidery machine, and you won't have any pulling or puckering or anything like that. Do you guys have questions? Any questions? No? We're good?
We're good.
We're good. So, now, you want to let them see what it's like? Now, I'm going to press our flannel piece that I treated.
You don't use eating bond with that, right?
No, you don't need to. No. So like I said,
You stick it on the fabric to do your applique patterns. How do you stick onto?
I just sit it there. You can put a pin if you wish, but I just hold my hand till I top stitch the outer edge. And once I top stitch, then I stitch in about 1/8 of an inch if I'm doing it on my sewing machine, and that will hold it in place. On the embroidery machine, it automatically does the tack down stitch. So I put nothing. And like I said, it works beautifully. You've got, once you wash it, that stiffness is gone. And especially if you're doing a quilt. It's so nice, the end results, right? in that bag you were looking at, there's no fusible or anything on the back of those applique pieces that's in that bag.
Can I show your bag?
Yes? Behind you. So like the pin cushion, those pieces in the bag, there's no fusible behind that. None of the pieces that are applique.
And this is Kay's beautiful bag she made.
So you can see there's scissors, which is fairly small.
There's her
And
lining.
when you do your applique, you know, sometimes with your fabric, even with Eaton Bond or some other fusible, like a fusible product, you get some fraying. Normally with this you don't. I rarely get fraying. Now the flannel becomes even a little stiffer than the cotton because it absorbs differently. So this really becomes like a piece of paper. So this is my piece of flannel. I can still press it a little bit, it's damp right there. But anyway, so, and this is the piece of flannel not treated. So now you can applique with it. Right? Now this is the piece I treated on the table. It will turn out the same as this one. I'll press it because I got it wet. If you want to print on an inkjet printer, I would do this step that I'm doing right now. I would let it sit overnight, and then the next day I would treat it again exactly the same as what I did today and press it, and it would be firmer and better for your printer. So it depends on what you're doing with it. For applique, this is exactly what I do. I don't do anything else. I find this is quite sufficient and it will hold in place very easily. But it does up fairly quickly. Usually if I'm doing a bunch of applique, I'll get my fabric ready probably the day before and just let it sit overnight, and then I use it the next day. No reason really you don't have to do that. It's just that's how I work. I like to get stuff prepped and ready for, so as I'm not doing that when I'm setting at the machine. So a lot depends, like I said, on what how you want to work yourself, and you will find what works best for you. And like I said, if you're piecing, you would spray like you would any other starch and press your pieces. I spray my fabric before I cut. Like if I'm cutting strips or whatever for a quilt, I would spray fabric like using any other spray starch, and I would then cut my pieces. And you have less fraying because, as we all know, a lot of fabrics fray. And when you do that, you have less fraying. So again, it's like, doesn't even sound like fabric, right? It's like paper. I think this one's a little stiffer than the other one.
So do it get stiffer after you iron it?
Oh, yes, it does. Before you iron it, it's soft like any other fabric. So pressing the heat and pressing sets the starch in it. But put it in warm water, and a few seconds it's gone. So that's why it's so nice for applique, and especially doing babies' things, because you got nothing abrasive. Whereas, you know, if you do something with a glue back, then you're going to have something stiff on a baby's item, right? Whereas, like, you can roll this and it will stay. Right? And fabric don't do that. Just to give you an idea of how stiff it actually gets. And for me, this is my new best friend. I've been using it for probably 3 years now. And I don't know why I didn't find it sooner.